Hello everyone, and welcome to our lecture on how to deal with missing data in pandas. There'll be a lot of times when you either receive or have to use a dataset that contains missing data. And if not dealt with, this missing data can skew the results of your analysis. So it needs to be dealt with before you can perform your analysis. There are two main ways that we can deal with missing data in pandas, and these are either by dropping or filling the rows. And let's go ahead and have a look at these inside of Jupyter Notebook now. What I'm going to do is copy in a small dictionary here, which contains some information on people's names, their age, the city that they live in, and their salary. Like usual, this dictionary is also available in the notebook file for this lecture, which is just called O4 Missing Data. And this is within the Section 12 NumPy folder. You might notice that inside of this dataset, there are a few np.nan values, which are one type of missing or invalid data. And as mentioned, in this lecture, we'll take a look at how to deal with these missing or invalid data points by either dropping them from our data frame or by filling them in with another value. To start off, let's go ahead and turn this dictionary into a data frame. And like usual, I'll just assign this to a variable called df. And here is the result of our data frame, and you can clearly see the missing values that we mentioned before. Let's begin by looking at the simplest and easiest way of dealing with missing or invalid data, which is just to simply drop the rows. And to do this, we can just use the drop NA method. We'll go ahead and say df.dropNA, and then if we run this with no arguments, it'll return a data frame where all the rows with any empty values will have been dropped, which leaves us with only the two rows where we had data in each column. Like with some of the other methods we've looked at, this doesn't actually modify the original data frame unless we specify the in-place argument and set it to true. And if you wanted to perform this operation on our columns, so drop any columns that contain a missing or NaN value, then we could pass in the axis equals 1 argument, like we've looked at before. And this time, pandas will now operate on our columns instead of on our rows. The only column that's returned here is the city column, as this is the only column that does not contain any missing rows or data points. Sometimes, however, you might not want to actually drop every single row, especially if that row has only got a single missing value. And for our data frame here, this would be very helpful, as we only had 5 rows to start, and by dropping all of the rows with missing data, we've only got 2 rows left, which we might decide is not enough for our analysis. If we wanted to keep rows that only had 1 missing data point, we could use the thresh argument, which if we have a look at our documentation here, we can see that we can use it to set how many non-NA values are required in order to retain the row. If we pass this in and say that it's equal to 3, then as long as a row has 3 non-NA values, or 3 columns with data in, then it will be kept, which you can see here. And just to quickly go over what's happened here, if we look at our original data frame, we've got 4 total columns for their name, age, city, and their salary. And we've said with our thresh argument that as long as 3 of these different columns have data for that row, then we'll keep it instead of what we had before, where every column had to contain data. If we set our thresh to 2, then it'll return every row in our data frame, as each row already has at least 2 populated columns. Okay, let's now move on and have a look at how to fill missing data instead of just dropping the row. To do this, we can use the fill NA method. So if we quickly look at our data frame, let's now use the fill NA method on this to fill in our missing values. If we pass 999 into this, then it'll fill every NaN value in our data frame with the value of 999. and value is our first argument, which is why we didn't need to explicitly say that our value is equal to 999. But from a practical perspective, this isn't really too helpful, because the value of 999 is also completely inaccurate. Instead, we could actually fill in these values with the mean of that column. Let's demonstrate this by filling in the missing values in our salary column with the average for that column. We'll say DF and then our salary column, and then notice our two missing values here, and then we can fill this with the mean of that column. And then if we run this, our two rows that previously had an NaN value have now been filled with the mean of our salary column. Alternatively, we could also fill these values with the median instead, but which option is best really depends on the data that you're working with, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. As a good general rule though, mean works well when your data has a normal distribution, and median works well if your data is skewed. Okay, and that wraps it up for our lecture on how to deal with missing or invalid data inside of pandas. So we had either the drop NA method or the fill NA method, and which option you go for really depends on the data that you're working with. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you all in the next lecture, where we'll take a look at how to merge and join different datasets.